There are days etched into your memory forever, where every sound, every breath, every glance becomes a kind of emotional fossil, preserved in time. For me, that day was Mother's Day. 1 year ago. The day I found out that my marriage was over. The day I confronted the man I had built a life with, carried 2 children for, and believed in, even through the rough patches. It should have been a celebration. My first real Mother's Day as a mom to twins, who were just starting to giggle and wobble through the house with their uncoordinated toddler steps. But instead of flowers or brunch or even just acknowledgement, what I got was silence. Cold, pointed silence that had been becoming more frequent over the last year. I just didn't know what it meant, until I did. I had been suspicious, sure. No woman's intuition stays quiet when something feels wrong. Missed calls, late nights, conversations that stopped when I walked into a room, the untraceable cologne that lingered on his clothes, which wasn't his or mine. But even with the alarm bells blaring in my mind, I had clung to hope. Hope that maybe I was just exhausted, paranoid, overthinking, the way society trains women to doubt themselves. But that Mother's Day, I couldn't pretend anymore. The evidence came to me not in whispers, but in digital clarity, texts, photos, even a voicemail. Not just one woman, not even 2. He had been cheating on me with multiple women. Some of those women knew about me. Some didn't, but the one thing they all had in common, he'd been seeing them since I was pregnant. While I was growing 2 lives inside of me, battling nausea, hormones, insomnia, and the weight of becoming a mother, he was out playing bachelor. Not just once, repeatedly, carelessly, disrespectfully. When I confronted him, I was shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. The kind of rage that comes from realizing the person you trusted most had been living a double life under your nose. I didn't yell, though. I didn't throw things. I looked him in the eye, and I told him I knew every bit of it, and he didn't deny it. That silence, that chilling, hollow silence that followed my words, it was confirmation. It was cowardice, it was guilt, and it was the beginning of the end. I left him that day. Not physically right away, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. I was gone. The next weeks were a blur of paperwork, mediation, long talks with lawyers, and even longer nights lying awake, watching the twins sleep between sobs. But through it all, something inside me shifted. Something fierce. Something that said, "You're not going to let this break you." He moved out, or more accurately, he moved in, with her. One of the mistresses. The one who had taken up the most space in his hidden life. The one who was now pregnant. And just like that, my story as a wife ended. But my story as a woman reclaiming herself, that had only just begun. It's a strange kind of grief when the person you love becomes someone you no longer recognize. After the confrontation, after the tears, and after the cold realization that there was no salvaging what we had, he was gone. Not just from my life, but from the everyday rhythm of our children's lives, too. The man who once swore he couldn't wait to be a father was now playing house with another woman, preparing to be a father again, or so he thought. He didn't tell me he was moving in with her. I heard it through the grapevine, in the most humiliating way possible, at a custody mediation meeting. His lawyer casually mentioned that he had a new, stable household, and when I pressed for details, there it was, the mistress. Pregnant, living together, building a life out of the ruins of mine. I remember sitting across from him in that sterile conference room, fluorescent lights flickering above us like something out of a police procedural. I stared at the man I used to kiss goodnight and thought, I don't know who you are anymore. He didn't flinch. He just sat there, smug, like someone who believed they'd traded up. And maybe in his mind, he had a new woman, a new baby, a clean slate. Meanwhile, I was left juggling twins, a broken heart, and the kind of emotional whiplash that makes you question everything. The thing that hurt the most wasn't that he moved on, it was how easily he let go of his children. Weeks would pass and he wouldn't call. When he did, it was brief, awkward, disconnected. Like a distant uncle making polite conversation, not the father of two little people who shared his eyes. I kept telling myself, don't let your pain become their pain. I showed up every day for my kids with a smile, even when it felt like I was shattering inside. They were too young to understand, and I was determined to make sure their innocence was protected. They didn't need to know that their father had ghosted us, that he had chosen someone else, that he was building a new family while forgetting the one he already had. And then came the stories. Whispers from his sister, hints from mutual friends. It turned out the woman he moved in with, the pregnant one, wasn't just the other woman. She was controlling, possessive, and above all, jealous. Not of me, but of my kids. She doesn't like when he sees the twins, his sister told me one afternoon as we exchanged the kids at the grandparents' house. She says it makes her feel insecure. She thinks he still has feelings for you. I blinked at her, stunned. Still has feelings. This man barely checked in. He didn't attend their first birthday. He didn't call to hear their first words. But somehow, I was the threat. That changed everything. In a flash, I went from heartbreak to protective mode. My mind began racing. What kind of woman is threatened by children? What kind of environment would he be bringing them into if she's already trying to edge them out of his life? That was the moment I knew I couldn't trust him to protect them. So I made a choice. The only place he could see the kids would be at his parents' home, with supervision. Somewhere safe. Somewhere I knew they were surrounded by people who loved them. He didn't fight me on it. Maybe he was too distracted with the baby on the way. Maybe he didn't care enough to push back. Either way, the absence was deafening. For the first time, I realized something both painful and liberating. I wasn't just a single mother. I was the only parent showing up. They say divorce doesn't just end a marriage. It tests every relationship orbiting it. Your circle, your support system, your sense of who's really in your corner. In many ways, the end of my marriage revealed the unexpected truth of who my family really was. Not just the one I was born into, but the one I married into. Because here's the thing, even after everything, after the betrayal, the mistress, the silence, his family didn't abandon me. It was confusing at first. I expected them to shut me out, to choose blood over broken vows. But instead, they opened the door even wider. His mother still called to check on me. His father still dropped by with snacks for the twins. His sister, she became one of my fiercest allies. They didn't condone what he did. They didn't make excuses. They saw it for what it was: cruel, careless, and cowardly. And even though he had been the golden boy once, they chose to keep showing up for the people who had done nothing wrong, me and the twins. In some ways, the continued love was harder to accept than their rejection would have been. Every warm gesture from them reminded me of what I had lost. Not just a husband, but the life we were supposed to build. The family dinners, the shared milestones, the unspoken bond of being part of a tribe. But slowly, their presence shifted from painful to healing. Mother's Day came around again. The first one since the confrontation, since the divorce, since my world flipped upside down. I wasn't expecting anything from the day. No gifts, no cards, just a quiet Sunday with my kids and maybe a glass of wine if they napped long enough. But then I got the call. Come by, his sister said. We're doing a little thing for you. For me, at their house. I almost said no. My pride, still bruised and stitched together with dignity, hesitated. But something in her voice told me it would be okay. So I packed up the twins, threw on some mascara, and drove over. He wasn't there. That was the first relief. The second was the way everyone greeted me. Not like an ex-wife, not like a shadow of someone they used to know, but like family. There were flowers waiting for me, a plate set at the table, laughter filling the air that didn't feel forced or awkward. It felt normal. Maybe for the first time in a year. The kids ran around the backyard, barefoot and giggling, while I sat on the porch with his sister. We talked like we always used to, honest, open, raw. And that's when she told me. He's getting a paternity test, she said, sipping her wine. I blinked. What, for the baby? The one with her? It doesn't look like him. I stared at her, not sure if I heard right. What do you mean? She leaned in. The baby is clearly mixed. He's white, she's white, but the baby, not. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause filled with the sound of wind chimes and children's laughter in the background. Then I laughed. I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. The kind of laugh that bubbles up from your gut when something is too ridiculous, too comic, too perfectly twisted not to be real. I laughed like I hadn't laughed in months, maybe years, and in that moment, something inside me cracked open, not in a painful way, but in a freeing way. It was as if the universe had tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're not crazy. You were never the problem. Look at the mess he made." Karma had arrived, and it brought receipts. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need anything from him at all. I just needed that laugh. They say people show you who they are in the end, but sometimes, they also show you who they've always been. You just couldn't, or didn't want to, see it. When I found out about her, the woman he chose, I didn't know what to expect. Maybe some Instagram model, maybe someone younger, flashier, someone who gave him a fantasy to escape into when reality got too heavy. But no, she wasn't all that different from me on the surface. White, mid-30s, a job, a social media presence, the curated life that looks neat from a distance. But peel back the layers, and she was nothing like me. Where I had built a life, she built illusions. Where I tried to hold a family together, she played house with a man who was never hers to begin with. She wasn't the first, just the last one standing. And that's what made her dangerous. Because she knew he was married. She knew I was home with 2 babies. She knew there was a family involved. She wasn't a victim of his lies. She was complicit in them. She looked at the mess and chose to stay. She helped him sweep the glass under the rug while pretending it wasn't cutting someone else open. And still, he picked her. When I found out he was living with her, that she was pregnant, that they were starting a life, it gutted me. I won't lie and say it didn't sting. It did, like hell, not because I wanted him back, but because he walked away so easily. As if everything we built was disposable. As if his own children were just optional. But time has a way of revealing character. And hers showed itself quickly. She didn't like him seeing the twins. That much became clear. She didn't say it outright. Cowards rarely do. But she made it known. Passive comments, cold looks, and then the worst part, controlling his visits, limiting them, making him choose. And he did. He chose her. He chose to be there for her pregnancy and absent for the twins' birthdays. He chose to play dad to a baby that might not even be his while ghosting the ones who were undeniably his own. And for what? For control, for sex, for some illusion of a fresh start. I wrestled with that for months. I tried to understand. I tried to empathize. Maybe he was scared. Maybe she manipulated him. Maybe he didn't know how to deal with the shame. But at some point, the excuses dry up. And what you're left with is choice. He chose her, over and over again, and she chose to make me the enemy. Not him, not herself, me. Maybe she thought if he saw the twins, he'd remember what he left behind. Maybe she feared the guilt would catch up to him. Or maybe, just maybe, she saw in him a reflection of everything she would never be, a real partner. A real mother, a woman who didn't have to lie, manipulate, or steal to get love. And that made her insecure, jealous, vindictive. But what she didn't realize is this: you can't erase children. You can't rewrite history just because it doesn't fit your narrative. And you can't build a life on broken trust and expect it to hold. The cracks always show, eventually. And as I sat there that Mother's Day, laughing at the absurdity of him needing a paternity test, after everything, I realized something profound. She wasn't the woman he chose. She was the woman he settled for. Because the kind of man who walks away from his children isn't choosing love. He's choosing escape. There's a specific kind of absence that only a parent can leave. It's not just space. It's a vacuum. A quiet that hums with questions. Where's Daddy? Why doesn't he come? Will he be here tomorrow? At first, the twins were too young to notice his absence. In those early post-divorce months, I could get by with distractions, playdates, coloring books, snacks shaped like dinosaurs. But children grow. They start asking questions. They start remembering. And eventually, so did he, disappear. Piece by piece, day by day, he became a ghost. It started subtly. Missed phone calls, postponed visits, excuses, always next weekend or something came up. And even when he did see them, it was brief, rushed, like an errand, like a chore, 2 hours here, an afternoon there. Maybe 2 full weeks total if you added up every scattered moment across several months. At first, I tried to bridge the gap. I'd send him pictures, text updates, little milestones. She said a full sentence today. He took his first steps. Silence. Or worse, a thumbs up emoji hours later. No emotion, no engagement, just apathy. I stopped reaching out, not out of anger, but exhaustion. You can't keep dragging someone to be a parent. That's not how it works. You either show up, or you don't. And he didn't. His parents stepped in, like they always had. They were present, loving, grounded. They took the twins on weekends. They made sure they had structure, consistency, and love. But he had become a rumor in his own children's lives. I watched them stop asking for him. That hurt more than anything. When your kids stop asking for their father, it means they've learned not to expect him. It means absence has replaced presence so completely that even hope knows to stay quiet. But every now and then, the questions still come. Why doesn't Daddy live with us? Why doesn't Daddy come to the park? I never badmouth him. I never fill their hearts with my bitterness, even when I taste it in my own mouth. Instead, I give them the only truth I can without breaking their innocence. Daddy loves you in his own way. But sometimes, grown-ups have a hard time showing it. And then I hold them closer, longer, tighter, because I am both parents now. I am the one packing lunches, reading bedtime stories, holding their hands at doctor appointments. I am their safe place. Their constant. And he became a footnote. A flicker in a family photo we never took. He doesn't know their favorite shows. He doesn't know the names of their stuffed animals. He didn't see the time they had the flu and slept on my chest for 2 straight days. He wasn't there when they fell and scraped their knees or when they learned to count to 20. He is a ghost in the stories they'll remember. Sometimes I wonder if he feels the loss. If he sits up at night, wondering what his son's laugh sounds like or how his daughter smells after a bath. But then I remember the missed birthdays, the unopened gifts, the casual way he handed over fatherhood like it was optional. And I know, some people were never meant to carry that weight. He wasn't just a man who cheated. He was a man who abandoned. And that is something his children will one day know, in their own time, in their own way. But it won't be because I told them. It will be because they lived it. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be standing on my own, raising twins, managing a home, healing from betrayal, and still smiling, I would have laughed. Or maybe cried. Probably both. But here I am. There's a quiet transformation that happens when you survive something you thought would destroy you. It doesn't come with fireworks or some grand epiphany. It happens slowly, day by day, through the little things. Like the first night I didn't cry myself to sleep. Or the morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him once. Or the time I laughed. Not the forced kind, but the kind that bubbles up from a place you thought was gone forever. The strength didn't arrive in some cinematic moment. It came in the chaos. In the diapers and daycare drop-offs. In the nights I rocked a feverish child while battling my own exhaustion. In every bill I paid alone, in every solo grocery trip with 2 toddlers melting down in the cereal aisle. It came in being everything, every day, for 2 tiny people who looked at me like I hung the moon. No one teaches you how to be a single mom. There's no manual for rebuilding your identity after someone detonates your life and walks away. But you learn fast. You learn how to be both comfort and discipline. How to be soft and strong in the same breath. How to be alone without being lonely. And more than anything, you learn who the hell you really are. Because here's what I know now. I was never weak. I was never naive. I was trusting, loving, loyal. I gave him everything. And he chose someone else. But I never chose to break. I could have drowned in bitterness. I could have used my pain as an excuse to stay angry, closed off, small. But I didn't. I grew. I learned how to advocate for myself in courtrooms and custody meetings. I learned how to set boundaries without guilt. I learned that being the bigger person doesn't mean being silent, it means standing tall, with dignity, even when no one is clapping. And most importantly, I learned that I was enough. Not in some Pinterest quote kind of way. In the real, raw, messy way. The kind of enough that means showing up when no one else will. The kind of enough that means wiping away tears, mine and theirs, and still finding the energy to read Goodnight Moon for the 3rd time that night. There were days I didn't think I'd make it. Nights where I sat on the kitchen floor after the kids went to sleep, wondering how the hell I was going to do this alone. But I wasn't alone. Not really. I had 2 reasons to get up every single morning. 2 sets of feet that pitter-pattered down the hallway. 2 little voices calling, Mama. 2 tiny hearts beating beside mine, reminding me that my love story wasn't over. It had just shifted. I didn't just survive. I became the woman I needed when the world fell apart. And she's not to be underestimated. Karma doesn't always come crashing through the front door in a blaze of vengeance. Sometimes, she shows up quietly, softly, like a whisper behind a curtain. And when you least expect it, she laughs with you. That laugh, God, that laugh, it escaped me before I even realized it was happening. 1 year after the devastation. 1 year after the betrayal. On the very same day I had crumbled. Mother's Day, karma came knocking. And she brought the kind of poetic justice you don't write, you feel. I was at his parents' house, surrounded by warmth and familiarity. His mother, his father, his sister, they were still my people, even if he wasn't. They loved the twins fiercely, and somehow, they still made space for me. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because they knew who I was before all the cracks. They knew I never deserved what happened. The kids were playing in the backyard, chasing bubbles and screaming with the kind of unfiltered joy only toddlers know. And then his sister leaned over, wine in hand, eyes gleaming with barely concealed amusement. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, barely able to keep a straight face. "He's getting a paternity test." I blinked. What, for the baby? The one with her? Then she paused. Let it land. It doesn't look like him. At all. And just like that, it burst out of me. A sound I hadn't made in months. Not a polite giggle. Not the obligatory chuckle we offer in awkward conversations. No. This was laughter. Deep, guttural, loud enough to make everyone stop and look. Because of course he was. Of course, the woman he chose, over me, over his kids, over our life, might have been lying to him all along. Of course, the baby he was investing in, prioritizing over his own flesh and blood, might not even be his. You can't write irony like that. You just have to live through enough pain to appreciate it when it arrives. That laugh wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was release. It was the sound of weight lifting off my chest, of years of injustice beginning to fold back in on themselves. Because I didn't sabotage him. I didn't plot. I didn't wish him harm. I just lived. I stayed quiet. I did the work. I kept my head down and my heart open for my children. And somewhere in the process of healing, life took care of the rest. They say karma's real, that what you give, you get. I used to think that was just something people say to comfort themselves when the world feels unfair. But that day, in that backyard, hearing that the baby might not even be his, I believed, not because I wanted revenge, but because justice, when it comes unforced and unexpected, feels like balance. I didn't need him to lose. I just needed to win, in my own way. And I did. I won peace. I won clarity. I won my damn self back.